everyone. I'm glad you're able to join our podcast today. I'm really excited to be bringing a very special guest who I consider one of the leading thought leaders in organizational learning in the world today. His name is Nick Van Dam. He's had an illustrious career, and let me tell you briefly about him. He is presently a professor at the IE in Madrid, and as well a professor at the University of Amsterdam. Nick has also been involved as a professor at the University of Pennsylvania in the Chief Learning Officer program, working with students at that level for a number of years. Nick's personal career has taken a long and winding road with the experiences he's gained, and he'll talk about that shortly. But he was in the past the Global Chief Learning Officer of Deloitte. He was a partner in the human capital practice. He went on to become the CLO of McKinsey. And not only doing that, but he also was the founder of eLearning for Kids, an international organization promoting e-learning for young children between the ages of 5 and 12 years old. Really an exciting adventure. So, Nick, we're delighted to have you on our podcast today, and really interested to hear more about your background. And so we're going to focus on two parts with Nick today. Number one, we're going to hear about his background. Let's hear how he got to where he's been and his thinking around education and some of the challenges Nick has been confronted with. And also part two, Nick would like to have a discussion with us about lifelong learning. And I think this might be of particular interest to the younger folks who are starting out their career and just begun or have under 5 years of learning. And I'm trying to understand what it's going to take to become a leader in organizational learning, if that's one of your goals, and the importance of lifelong learning and how that's tied into your career development. So welcome, Nick, to our show today, and thank you for coming aboard. And we'd love to start out and hearing a little more about your background, where you started out in where you live now, and your family and your education, and I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, no, thanks, Brian, for inviting me for this podcast. Thanks everybody for taking the time to listen to this podcast, and I hope you get some interesting insights from my stories. Before I start actually with to talk about a little bit my school experience, I also want to highlight that Brian and I have been working together since almost 1996, 1997 on very exciting learning and leadership development programs for professionals and leaders at Deloitte in the United States, and even in Canada. And Brian, and I connected, and he's a dear friend and an amazing professional in the L&D space for so many years. I have seen so many things in organizations, and had a huge impact on helping organizations to become better when it comes to building leadership and learning capabilities. So delighted to be here and to chat with you, Brian. In terms of, reflecting on our own development and reflecting on why we are where we are, and I think there are many things that have an impact on our lives. One thing, of course, is the schools that we attended. And if I reflect on my elementary school, it was a school in the Netherlands, a school outside actually in the woods. And it was a school known for experiential learning, immersive learning, and learning from nature. And this goes back quite some time. But the whole notion of this immersive learning, learning in small teams with other kids, is something that I really enjoyed when I was in elementary school. And of course, today in many organizations, we are talking about how can we make sure that our learning experiences are more immersive, more impactful, where we collaborate with other kids, right? So, so that's one piece. Secondly, I would say, high school, going to high school, and I think if I reflect, one of the things that probably had a huge impact on me as well is, a couple of teachers who really inspired me actually to learn, to be creative, to think out of the box, who got me excited about different topics, but more, they also got me excited to potentially pursue a career in training, in teaching, in developing people. And that's, if I reflect on my next step, my college, I decided to go to a college where I got a degree in economics and business economics, and also a degree in pedagogy. I had in mind to move into the field of learning and development and teaching at a different school. So that has been very important. And in addition to school, of course, also our social environment, family, etc., has also a huge impact on who we are. So I grew up in a family of an entrepreneur. My dad and my mom, they were running a number of retail stores in the Netherlands. And, if you are an entrepreneur, basically you talk every day over dinners with your children about the business, about new products, about the customer, but also about people, and how important it is to attract the right people in your stores, how to motivate them, how to develop them, how to retain them. And also, I have learned from my dad, develop an entrepreneurial mindset. And an entrepreneurial mindset is not just important if you are an entrepreneur, but also in terms of, it helps you in terms of reflecting on the world and think about that you are basically have an opportunity to create your own future. And if you work in an organization, having an entrepreneurial mindset that will help you to think about how can I do new things all the time? How can I make things better? How can we stay more customer, client-centric? So also that part, Brian, and all the listeners here, has shaped my life as well.
Yeah, so interesting indeed. My parents, as I have mentioned before in a prior podcast that we've run, Nick, are immigrants from Europe post-war. And one of the areas that they spoke quite a lot about to my brother and sister that really made an impression on me being young was talking about in the world ahead, what they've experienced in the past is situations could potentially take everything away from you, your money, your home, your family, or whatever, but they can never take away your education and your learning. And you will be able to reapply that type of learning in the future. And that's all about having the ability to use your mind really well. And I think that's a really important part, being influenced by our parents. So thank you for sharing that with us, Nick. And was there anything, in your youth that, was particularly life-changing in terms of influencing you to go the path that you decided to go? Or when you started out after, let's say, graduating university, did you make your decision there? I'm just curious, sometime when you're young or whatever, you're influenced again that, hey, I like doing this and I think I could help people in this. Any thoughts around that, Nick?
Yeah. So one of the things what I did in college is that I took a couple of classes in information technology and programming. And I was just, interested in that topic. And that turned out to be, a terrific choice because due to the fact that I completed actually in some of the computer classes, I started my first job at Siemens or Siemens Nixdorf in the Netherlands. And they hired me actually initially to, be involved in technology. And I've been part of a department where I did some programming. And then soon I discovered myself like, hey, I really like IT. And also I really enjoy the combination of IT and something with people. And that's how I got involved in basically training customers to use information systems, to use applications. So the teaching component. And from there, I got really involved in customer education. And I graduated when I was 28 as the manager of a Siemens learning center in the Netherlands, focusing on customer education. And from there, I broadened actually my experience, also being involved in learning and development programs for people internally in the organization. And then at one point, I had an opportunity. I was offered an opportunity for Siemens to go to Munich and to take on an international role in Europe. But also at the same time, I was asked by a small company in the United States to join them. And I checked out both options. And when you talk about life-changing, Brian, I said to myself, I know Europe really well. What is really different for me is the United States. So I decided to, join a small company, move to the US, and learn about the culture in the US and how to do business in the US, and become also a learning leader in the United States. And at the time that I, changed ships, I moved to the US. This small company was acquired by Deloitte. So as a consequence, I got integrated in Deloitte. And then in Deloitte, I had a fantastic opportunity to progress as a consultant in the human capital practice, as a learning leader, as an HR leader, as the chief learning officer for Deloitte Consulting, and later on as the chief learning officer for the chief learning officer for Deloitte globally, for at that time, close to 350,000 people. So very exciting. And then, and I've been in my international roles for over 25 years. And then, I had also another chapter. I always believe that life and careers are all about chapters. That McKinsey reached out to me and asked me, Nick, we are looking for somebody like yourself, who is really an expert in learning and development, and also someone who can help us with innovations in learning. So I joined McKinsey as a partner, chief learning officer, also in the HR executive, to help and shape the impact of learning and leadership development at McKinsey, and also helping a number of clients at McKinsey when it comes to overall learning strategy, learning and development, etc. So that's kind of, my professional career, Brian. And, and also for the listeners, I'm a big fan of lifelong learning, as Brian mentioned at the beginning. And the question is always, well, Nick, what have you done when it comes to lifelong learning? And, there are different tracks if you reflect on that. One is, of course, your experience, making sure that you move into new role, different roles all the time, that you have new experiences you can learn from, because learning on the job is extremely powerful and very effective. So that's one track. But then there's another one, and that's more your education track. And as I mentioned, I completed my bachelor in economics, business economics, and pedagogy. And then later on, I took a master degree in organizational sociology, but also with a lot of focus on psychology. And then later on in my 40s, I had still the desire to get my doctorate. So I started with a PhD program, and I graduated as a doctor in human capital development in my mid-40s. So from an education perspective, go back to school on a regular basis in our lives will help us also to continue, learn, and grow.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I think education, that piece, if you really want to become a very good practitioner within organizational learning, I think you need the academic foundation, the support that you gain by going back into the classroom or online today and working with other professionals who are kind of at the same level as you, and you could share and exchange examples of your work and some of the challenges that you might be having at work. And it becomes a very powerful environment to grow yourself and learn by taking these auditional courses. So I don't think, like in my days, Nick, and perhaps yours, when you finished school and, you came out bachelor's and you jumped in, did a master's, and many people, that was it. Okay, let's go on in our career and spend the next 40 years, working. Today, it's a whole new way of learning today. It doesn't stop when you get a certain degree or whatever. You need to upgrade your skills. And I know you've been a big advocate of upgrading skills. And Nick, why do you think it's important that workers today are thinking about, or should be thinking about, constantly how skills are changing in the workplace and what they should be doing to upgrade their skills? And it's kind of based on my thinking, Nick. A lot of organizations don't support you or tell you, you need to be doing this because the future's changing this. What advice might you give to people in the workplace today about keeping their skills up to date and continued learning?
Yeah, no, thanks, Brian. Well, it starts with being aware of, the opportunities that we have in our lives, and also, what it takes to really kind of, take advantage of our opportunities and to live our full potential. Now, from a context perspective, if you look at careers today, there's some research done by Professor Linda Gretton from London Business School. She wrote a book, The 100-Year Life, and she looked at a lot of research, and she came to the conclusion that, with many other researchers, that about 50% of the people born after 2007 in developed countries will likely celebrate their 100th birthday. Now, if you reflect on that, that's very exciting if people are getting older and they can do more in their lives, etc. And it also has an impact on, as an example, retirement. Because people live longer, many countries have pushed out official retirement age. So in many countries it's now 66, 67, it's getting to 70 in some countries. Yeah. So if you reflect on that, if you are graduating today, you will probably work until you are in your early 70s. In other words, we have a 50-year career ahead of us, and that's fantastic. Now, for those of you who have been in the workforce for quite some time, if you reflect on what has changed over the last decade, it's amazing. If we think about what will happen over the next 10 years, well, we have no idea. 20 years from now, well, complete transformation. So, and what we know from research is that it is expected, and this is kind of insights from the World Economic Forum, that for every person in the workforce today, our jobs will change tremendously over the next decade. And it's expected that 30 to 40% of competencies that we have today will become obsolete. And we have to upskill ourselves, develop new competencies. Now, according to research from McKinsey, over the next decade, close to 400 million people need to change jobs because their job doesn't exist anymore. It has been automated, robotized, etc. So they have to reskill themselves. So my story is that reflecting ourselves on our careers, the only way to stay relevant and to have a successful career in different organizations or as an independent professional, the only way to make that happen is to continue to reinvent ourselves and to continue to learn and grow. So that's kind of the story about the why, Brian. This is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when I read some of the literature about organizations, a large majority of them are simply not prepared in terms of what to do. How do I upskill? What do we need to
Yeah,
know about the new roles and the new skills they
yeah,
need? And how do we prepare our employees for that? So there's a lot of unknown there. Very exciting at the same time, but a lot of thought needs to go into the planning of their organizational learning and how it really is changing, and how organizations adapt. So thank you for that, Nick. And then I'm thinking, you went through a long and good career in the consulting world, leading learning in two really large global organizations. And more recently, over the last 18 months, you've slowly migrated away from being a CLO at these companies. I know you're still doing work and consulting work for them when they need to bring your expertise in, but now you're involved being professors and working with the younger learners as opposed to older learners. What's your feelings around that?
yeah. No, I think it's very exciting, Brian. I think that for people have had an opportunity to develop a lot of insights in terms of many leadership roles that they have been in, including myself. I always say there's an obligation actually to kind of give back to society and to help the next generations to develop themselves and to get ready, or at a more accelerated pace ready than previous generations. So I have the privilege at IE University to be involved in a number of different programs. I like to spend time with people who are in their undergraduate programs and to learn also about how they think about the future, what matters for them, how they learn, but also in master programs, MBA programs, and also I'm playing a role in executive education, where I, typically have people in their mid-40s who are, pursuing additional expertise, knowledge, because they know if you are, I always say, if you are now in your mid-40s, you are just halfway your career. So you have another at least 20 years ahead of you. So, different audiences, and to help people to understand key concepts, models, frameworks, but also develop skills, and also to learn a lot about ourselves. Because, Brian and listeners, one of the philosophies that we have been embracing at McKinsey, but also in the programs that I'm leading, is about if you want to lead an organization, if you want to be successful in leading teams, guess what? Everything starts with yourself, right? So the whole notion of developing ourselves, leading self, that will have an impact on leading teams and leading organizations. So the more we understand ourselves, our own emotions, about how we act and why we act in certain ways, the better actually, because that will open opportunities to have an impact on others and organizations. So that's one philosophy that I'm a big fan of. And yes, again, so very exciting to also learn actually from the different groups that I'm engaged with.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm envious of you actually being able to work with the youth today and bring the knowledge and contacts to your program at IE. And I would encourage some of our listeners to investigate the program that's being run from the university there, led by Nick and his team, and think about perhaps pursuing that advanced learning. It's a great program. So thanks for sharing that, Nick. And as we slowly come to the end here, Nick, one of the things in organizations today that we hear is very important is engagement. How a lot of younger people and older people simply aren't engaged in their work anymore. They don't perhaps see a purpose to it, or whatever the reason may be. And we're hearing with particularly millennials, they want to have a purpose for their work today, and trying to give back in many areas. And one of the largest achievements that I think that you achieved, Nick, was going back to 2004, that you were the founder of e-learning for kids, which is a global foundation that supports learning on a global basis. It has a wide and diverse curriculum for the ages of 5 through 12 years of age. It provides multiple language learning. It's truly an awesome opportunity to learn through technologies. And Nick's organization has been, touching remote corners of the world and bringing a learning to these people. So clearly, to me, Nick, you had a purpose going back 15 years ago. Could you tell us more about e-learning for kids and what your goal was at that time, and how's it going along today?
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Brian. Also, you have been instrumental in the foundation of e-learning for kids in 2004. So it was a very exciting journey together as well. So the thing is, as most of you are listening, have a college degree, we are higher educated, and if we stop and we ask ourselves the question, why can we do today what we are doing? It simply goes back to education, right? So imagine if you would be born in a country where you would not have access to elementary school education. Guess what? You would go nowhere after that, right? So, and what I learned actually is that, and I take numbers from UNICEF, that there are, 60 to 70 million children who even don't go to elementary school. And then there are a couple of 100 million children who basically get poor elementary school education. And, we know if that's your start, guess what? Nothing happened in high school, or you won't go to high school. And even after that, there's no opportunity to go to college. And that's why, we started e-learning for kids, using technology, using the power of the internet, using insights from pedagogy to design and develop a rich curriculum of digital learning courses for children between 5 to 12, based on the International Baccalaureate curriculum. That's the only international curriculum globally, and make that available on the internet for free. And we also work with a lot of schools around the world, and it might be hard for you to imagine this, but schools who do not have access to the internet, and we provide them with the courseware on jump drives, and so they can install the courseware on their local computers. And what's very exciting is that over 20 million children from all over the world have been benefiting from our free digital education that they use to supplement and to support their elementary school education. And of course also for kids who do not have access to this, to elementary school education, they have an opportunity to learn through technology. So a very exciting journey.
Yes, it is. And it's an awesome organization. You could find it at elearningforkids.org online, and to learn more and share it with your friends and people with young children, please go ahead and do that. That would be terrific. And Nick, one last question. You have written and published many books about organizational learning and other related topics over the years. Is there one particular book that stands out in your mind that you would like to share with our listeners today?
Yeah, well, thanks, Brian. I would say probably two. One is actually for everybody, so for professionals in the workforce. And the book is called You, the Positive Force in Change. That's a book that I co-authored with my friend, Eileen Rogers. And this is a fantastic book, very easy to read, and provides you with insights on leading yourself, leading organizations, based on the science of positive psychology, but also the neurosciences. So I would say that's a fantastic book to read for everybody. You will benefit from it tremendously. And then another book more for the L&D community is called Elevating Learning and Development, a book that I co-authored with a number of my wonderful McKinsey colleagues last year. And that's a book, really focusing on the profession, L&D, and leadership development. And what's exciting is that if you buy one of these books, all the royalties will be donated to the eLearning for Kids Foundation. So indirectly, you help others with education as well.
Yeah, I was fortunate to read your book, Nick, and I thought very highly of it, and I would recommend Elevating Learning and Development to any of my colleagues who want to learn about learning in an organization and different components of it, and looking at things a little bit differently. And I would suggest you take advantage of it right now and help out eLearning for Kids. So Nick, thank you so much for joining us today. This is the end of this podcast. We're delighted to have Nick Van Dam. It's being filmed right now, and it's in the evening time in Spain and the morning time here in Southern California. So thanks for staying late and talking with us today. And I hope our guest got a lot out of your inspirational speech, Nick. And I'm most thankful to have you aboard. And I wish you continued success in elevating learning and development, Nick. Thanks so much.
Yeah. No, thank you so much, Brian. And thanks everybody for listening to this podcast. And you can find my profile on LinkedIn, of course. And I wish you all the best in developing yourself and developing other people in your organizations.
Thank you.